Next on London Tonight, the sad news that the former British heavyweight boxing champion Gary Mason has been killed in a cycling accident. A van driver was arrested on suspicion of causing death by careless driving after he died in Wallington in South London. The 48-year-old only lost one professional fight to the future world champion Lennox Lewis. And after his boxing days, he turned out for the London Crusaders rugby league side. But more recently, he'd turned his hand to community work, as Nick Thatcher reports.
So he's putting the punches together well here, Mason.
He was known as a tough, hard-hitting fighter, and the stats speak for themselves. As a heavyweight boxer in a career spanning a decade, Gary Mason won 37 of his 38 professional bouts, 34 of those by knockout. He was British champion for more than 2 years. The only time he lost was to future world champion Lennox Lewis in 1991. Lewis's manager, Frank Maloney, remembers Gary as a tough opponent in the ring and a gentle giant out of it.
He was very strong, he was very fit, and he was exciting. He knocked you out, and that's what people like in heavyweight boxing. It's just sad to hear about what's happened to him. He would just lighten up the whole room with a smile. He's that sort of character, and I think he'd be sadly missed.
When an eye injury forced him out of boxing, Gary would go on to lead a varied life, including a spell as a sports pundit. And he even played a handful of games for rugby league side London Crusaders.
When Gary left boxing, he went on to do so many other things. He did a lot of charity work that people are unaware of. He did a lot for children's hospices, he did a lot for children's hospitals, and he did a lot for underprivileged children in the main. But what I can tell you about Gary is that not only was a big man, he had the biggest heart ever.
Gary was cycling near his flat in Wallington early yesterday morning when his bike was in a collision with a white van. He died at the scene. The 43-year-old driver was arrested on suspicion of causing death by careless driving and bailed pending further inquiries. In recent years, Gary had combined his charitable work with employment as a security guard at a local hospital. Tonight, one tribute simply remembered him as a real character, a South London boy trying to do well. Nick Thatcher, London Tonight.
Gary Mason, who died yesterday.
The family and friends of the boxer Gary Mason have been paying their tributes to him. He died yesterday morning when his bike was in collision with a van. Matthew Morris joins us from Wallington in Surrey. Matt.
Yes, Mike, some members of Gary Mason's family were here just a few minutes ago visiting the scene where he died. He was 48, he had a flat near here, and yesterday morning at about 6:15 he was on his bike at this road junction behind me here in Wallington. He died after being involved in a collision with a van.
1991, Gary Mason versus the rising star Lennox Lewis at Wembley Arena. It was to be the only defeat in 38 professional bouts for Gary Mason.
I think people will look back on Gary as as a very, very good, first of all, a very good fighter. That's what he'd want to be remembered for. Had he come around to a different era, had he have not struggled with his weight, he did struggle with his weight a lot. Had he not have struggled with his weight, and had he have come around at a slightly different era, he may well have fought for the world title and might even have won it.
Still gives this come on.
The former heavyweight fighter became British champion in 1989 after beating Hugh Roy Curry at the Royal Albert Hall. His reign lasted until 1991 and that fight with Lennox Lewis, who was under Frank Maloney at the time.
He had that fight with Lennox Lewis in 1991 at Wembley, which was probably one of the most brutal heavyweight fights seen in Britain between two guys who didn't want to lose. And, unfortunately one of them has to lose. One guy's career went up and one guy's career ended in that ring. And it was Gary's career that ended in that ring.
After boxing, he tried his hand at TV work, rugby league, even opening a jewellery shop. And 4 or 5 years ago, he began to worship at All Saints Church in Carshalton.
A very unusual man, a very unusual combination of being private and being very at ease with people. Very popular. When you shook his hand was so soft, and so was his manner. Very gentle man.
Yesterday, a 43-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of causing death by careless driving. He's been bailed until March. Tonight, stars and fans of boxing are uniting in paying tribute to Gary Mason.
Yes, and one former sparring partner, Frank Bruno, described him as probably a better technical boxer than me, saying he had a lot of respect for the guy. And online, fans have been having their say. On Twitter, Gary Mason described as a top man, a top fighter, a gentleman of the ring. Back to you, Mike.
Thanks, Matt. And very briefly, your memories of Gary Mason.
I met Gary Mason with Frank Maloney, who was talking about him earlier, and a lovable rogue, a fantastic character, and he'll be sorely missed.
OK, Mark, thank you very much for that.